And I think it's an appropriate time to note that members of the public are advised that individuals and the media may be audibly or visually recording these proceedings. So this is the Hamilton Farmers Market Subcommittee meeting. We thank Councillor Collins for stepping out of the other meeting on floor number 7 and arriving to establish this as, I guess, for the record, Ida, we would, how would we describe this now that the time has lapsed?
The meeting that started at 2 o'clock stands adjourned because we passed the 30-minute mark. So we'll have to have a motion to call a special meeting and waive the rules of notice.
Moved by Collins, seconded by Pasuta. All in favor? It carries. Madam Clerk, any changes?
No, Mr. Chair, there are no changes.
May I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Pasuta, seconded by Collins. All in favor? Carried. Any declarations of interest? There are no declarations of interest. A motion to approve the minutes of our December 12th, 2013 meeting. Moved by Collins, seconded by Pasuta. All in favor? That's carried. Any delegation requests? There are none. On to our presentation. Thank you very much to all of our staff for being patient and waiting it out. I call upon now John Hertel. This presentation is respecting item 5.1, the status report regarding the staff direction from the previous meeting.
I guess I'm live. Am I live here? I am. Good afternoon, and thank you very much, members of the subcommittee, staff, and citizens for joining today. I wanted to, maybe before I actually start, just double check in terms of any time constraints we have. And I'll try to monitor, how about this? I'll try to go fairly quickly through the material and leave it to you in terms of questions and such to slow me down as opposed to the other way around. Okay? Thank you.
What do you anticipate this, President? What length would you anticipate?
I would say about 20 minutes.
That's fine. Good.
And then, dialogue around it. Okay. So, first of all, close this down. In the way of an introduction, I'd like to thank members of the Stallholders Association Advisory Board, members of staff across the organization for really picking up the torch after our December the 12th meeting and running very hard on the number of actions that were outstanding. I'd like very much today to use this time to give you an update on our progress, and there are some areas within the presentation that I would like for your consideration and approval of specific recommendations. Okay? So first of all, on signage. Just 2 days ago, as we'd indicated previously, we were to receive 3 design concepts from a firm out of Toronto by the name of Entro Communications, and those were reviewed by myself, Donna Lee McDonald, and Ken Coit, who represented Culture. And I'd like to thank Donna Lee and Ken for putting that piece together so that we could be reviewing these design concepts along with the team who represent the public art program that is currently underway, which we've talked about as well. The design, all the signage design concepts we felt collectively were very consistent with the architecture and streetscape of the building. They did an excellent job of coming up with a variety of options that included, both the signage, I'll say, and complementary bike stands, etc., that could be pieced together. Under a signed non-disclosure, we also reviewed the artwork or the renderings of the 6 public art finalists to again try to get a sense as to whether or not there was an alignment, I'll say, in the designs, and exciting designs for sure. And I think we all felt extremely optimistic that this can come together as a very complementary thing. Without, I'll say, giving anything away, I must admit that it was really valuable for me personally to get a better sense of the kind of concepts that were kind of coming to the fore, and I'll say in the top 6 so far, that really did an excellent job in very unique ways of representing the market as well as the, the general streetscape. So we're at a point of the need to dive deeper into a conversation with our partners at Culture to understand the nuances, I'll say, of the process of the public art so that we can, I'll say, forge ahead with signage as quickly as possible on the exterior without negatively impacting the public art process. There is a public consultation process, a judging process, etc. We're not worried about, the manufacturing process per se. So we actually have a meeting set up next week again to dive deeper into those conversations. Our general thought is that we will go ahead and look at the 3 design concepts. We need to get a little bit more input for sure, including the subcommittee members, get your thoughts, a few others from the advisory committee, and then seek some specifications and costing on those, knowing that it's going to be about a 6 to 8 week fabrication process for whichever one that we end up choosing, so that we're ready to go basically as soon as we can, based on the work that's being done in the public art domain as well. So I don't have a more specific answer today to a date, when exactly will we, but I'll just say that we're optimistic that working together we can get this done reasonably quickly. And I think also with the nature of the designs that we reviewed, the fabrication time and the cost associated with them is not out of sight. So I'm also confident that we'll be able to secure quickly the budgets to get the work done. Through you, Chair, to Council.
We can ask as we go. Go ahead, Chad.
Thank you. And just in the, we've tried to build a better bridge of communication with our stall holders and our vendors, and I'm wondering whether there'll be time, even very quickly, if there is an element of choice that we have before this committee, whether we'll be distributing that information to all the stall holders to say, look, here are the 3 options that we have. Do you have a preference in terms of which ones you'd like the city to adopt? And then that information hopefully will be in front of us when we have our decision to make from a budgetary standpoint, design standpoint.
Our initial thought is that, well, and from my background, I would say that creative like this should be presented, not, distributed, if you know what I mean. So we do not want to send it out electronically, but we do want to meet with folks. So our first thought, of course, is to meet with the Stallholder Association representatives and then to figure out a way, perhaps in the community kitchen, to be sharing those designs and getting that input. Okay. I think it's important, too, having had a glance at this work, you just can't help but think that there are all sorts of great publicity opportunities as this process unveils. So, the public will see the work that's going to be installed long before it's installed. Excuse me, talk too much with my hands. And I think that, fits very nicely into a lot of the marketing program work that we're doing as well, that will drive some visibility, some positive visibility around the market itself. So our specific recommendation on this is that staff obtain specs and quotes on the exterior signage options as soon as possible without negatively impacting the public art program mandate and process, and report back to the Hamilton Farmers Market Subcommittee. And Ida, do I do anything else with that at this point, or just kind of carry on?
If the chair would ask for a motion.
Pull them all together? Okay, great. Thank you. So parking, again, have made a lot of progress, I think, since our December the 12th meeting, and I want to thank Ted and Marty for their support and cooperation in working with us, Eleonora from legal, to make sure that we were staying on the right side of the tracks. And we worked through what we think is a program that can help us get started on parking. I wanted to emphasize, and this is not just my view, but I do feel strongly about it, it is the view of many, that parking by itself is not a silver bullet. This is not the solution, let's get free parking or of some sort and the market will flourish. Not so. But as part of an overall plan to, I'll say, focus on customer service and convenience, it has an element to play, an important role to play for sure. So our proposal essentially is that we would create this as a holistic relaunch, if you will, that includes a number of other customer-affected pieces to this under a marketing program. And, you know, with the beginning and the end, we don't have enough money from the funding pot that's available to say, let's just do it. So we need to learn, we need to establish metrics, understand the measured value of these, how much it costs us, all that stuff. So our proposal really is that this is part of a marketing program and relaunch theme, all of which needs to be brainstormed and fleshed out, you know, whether it's Taste the Spring, Grow With Us, New Beginnings, and it'd be 100 other suggestions that we work our way through. But we really need to think of this as a pilot. We hope that we can have this put together very quickly, so we would create the program by a target date the 7th of February. We would be able to promote the program through the month of February and then actually launch it effective March and end in June the 30th. So we have a very specific window that we're going to be tracking the parking usage, the metrics around it in terms of which stall holders, you know, had the most customers, be validated, all this sort of thing. It's the intent would be that it's a 1 hour validated parking through the efforts of the parking authority under the banner of convenience. We're going to, not we, they've offered to move the short-term parking signage and area from 1A, where you have to walk down, to 1B, where you walk in at street level. So you can go to the market, you can have your ticket validated for 1 hour free, and you're going to carry your goods across the street to the parkade on the ground level and into your vehicle, and away you go. And they'll hold, as they do currently, 25 to 30 stalls for that, and we'll play that out. One of the areas I know when we spoke with the Stallholders Association in the past, there are a bunch of different configurations for how much should this cost. Our feeling at this point in time is that we should not negatively impact the other merchants in the area or those others that park their cars for different reasons in the area. Therefore, the simple approach is that we will be paying the going rate per hour, which is $2.50 per hour. The estimate is based on the numbers that Marty provided previously, was that we have about, using today's dollars and cents or at least the more recent historical dollars and cents based on volume, we could pay for about 6 months. But we're optimistic that the program is actually going to create more volume. So in order to make sure we have the budget, we wanted to retain, or to frame this, I should say, as a 4-month pilot. And we should, within that, then have the cushion for the funding. As I emphasize, we do need, to measure. You know, it's the old cliche, what can be measured can be improved. And we'll do customer surveys, we'll do vendor surveys, we will track the data that flows through the parking authority and make sure that we know the beginning of and the end. We'll also redo, which we're due anyway, we'll redo the traffic counts going through the market. We know what happened, I'll say, Nations opening, and we now want to see what the new benchmark is and then see how it changes over that period of time. The challenge today is that we're focused very much on trying to make as many fast incremental gains as possible. So if the question were asked of me, do you have a sustainable model in place? I would say no. Could we figure one out? I would say yes. So we have this window of time to the end of June to understand it, and if we see that there's incremental value in it, and the vendor community does as well, then we have the license and the drive to then create a model that is sustainable. Okay. So our recommendation, and this is one that's of particular interest And Eleonora was extremely helpful in framing because it does have to go to council because of something that is currently on the books with council. That it be resolved that staff implement a parking validation program in the York Street Parkade, which provides patrons of the Hamilton Farmers Market with 1 hour of validated parking in the York Street Parkade during market hours. That a portion of level 1B, in the York Street Parkade be designated for short-term parking. That the parking validation program be implemented on a pilot basis commencing February 2014. And when I say February, that's really the design and, doing the marketing plan, all that sort of thing, and ending no later than June the 30th. That the parking validation program be funded by stallholder fees previously designated for promotional purposes. That staff report back to the Hamilton Farmers Market Subcommittee on the results of the parking validation program prior to the expiry of the pilot period. Questions on it?
Yeah, I have a speakers list that includes all of the subcommittee members.
Okay.
It's long. But just before, I just want to be clear, what you're asking here then, John, is that we move that these recommendations go before council. That's the subcommittee's resolve. Should we move in that direction? Okay.
Yes, thank you for that clarification.
Councillor Pasuta, followed by Councillor Collins.
Thanks. And I was just going to ask, I just want to be clear, John, and I'm certainly supportive of that recommendation, but the promotional materials that we're going to now live without, because formerly those funds would have paid for something of some benefit, I don't know to what extent, but we would have been paying for some kind of a marketing brochure, advertisements. What are we living without now that we're transferring those funds to the parking program?
You'll see in another slide further on where we talk about marketing and some of the elements that this represents about $15,000 from, I'm going to say, $43,000 budget, something like that. So clearly what it does is force us to step back and say, what can we do in the way of leveraging low-cost, high-reach assets, i.e. social media. Would be a great example. So one of the things that we've been able to do pre-Christmas is, I'll say, get started, working with Andy Zimmerman, Mike Kirkopoulos and team. And we have some momentum on that front, some Facebook stuff going out, et cetera. We need to really exploit that to the nth degree. And if you think of a lot of the downtown population, Joey Coleman's a great example. If we can, working with Joey and his social network and others who have vast networks downtown, the promotional opportunities at very low cost are there. I think also we have an opportunity to work with other citywide organizations and assets. Of course, I would automatically think of tourism and leveraging off of some of the programs that they're doing. So maybe we can be included, for example, in some of the things that they're doing, but in a different way, a more expansive way. We've talked and had some great suggestions from Charlie and others about creating some in-house opportunities to do weekly specials where we are essentially, I don't know if we're selling is the right word because there may not be a charge involved, but we're creating spaces within a weekly program that different vendors are highlighted, et cetera. So we have a lot of work to do in that, and we're targeting that February 7th date as a date. We'll have all of those thoughts fleshed out and laid out against the remaining budget, as opposed to coming back and saying, give us more.
So there's nothing, I wanted to make sure there's nothing in particular that we're we're losing, where we used to have a certain radio spot at a certain time of the day, and now because we're going with the free parking, we're not going to have that. It's basically...
No, it's essentially going back to the drawing board with a smaller budget.
Thanks for confirming.
Pasuta.
Thanks, Chairman Farr. So, through here to John. So, John, do you have any idea when you advertise a farmer's market in the local Spectator, do you ever have an idea or response? Do people read this and see that? Are we getting a bang for the buck out of that?
Well, the cliche generally around advertising in public media is that that you're wasting half your money. You just don't know which half. Unless you have a coupon or measurement program involved in it, you really can't assess it. So part of the work that, is kind of my background is that you always want to be able to measure performance. So when we do anything around this, we'd like to be able to tag it in terms of numbers of eyeballs for sure. But ideally, you create a promotion versus I'll say, versus institutional advertising where we're telling nice stories. We want to create a call to action where people will demonstrate by their behavior that this thing we're doing, this promotion, drives them to the market, and somehow we're able to track the fact that that money spent drove their being at the market. It is not a pure science unless you're using a lot of the web-based tools, but we'll work hard at measuring that response.
Mr. Chairman, that was the answer I was looking for. Thank you.
Radio days, the sales guys used to always talk to clients, and they're usually lower levels, not buying a lot of ads, $5 grand, $4 grand here. There's a lot of nickel and dime action from the 80s through the 90s. And they used to always try to talk the client out of using that tagline at the end of the 30-second or 60-second spot. Tell them blank sent you, because if only 2 people came in and said blank sent me, they wouldn't buy any more spots.
Right.
It's an interesting line you had there, Hertel. I had one question, but it was answered, I think, for the most part. So I think we can move on to governance. And then, like I said, we'll move the motions in their entirety once John's reports.
Right. So in the area of governance, based on, excuse me, on our December the 12th meeting, we agreed at that time that we would go out as quickly as possible and try to track down some truly expert firms in the in the market business, by a broad definition, who had great experience, depth, and expertise in helping communities create and execute new boards. So we did find, 2 outstanding firms to work with. One is Evergreen, and I think a lot of members of council, or some at least, have experience with the Brickworks in Toronto. That's operated by Evergreen, and it's one of their many programs across the country. So we spoke to them, we met with them, and we have a, and this was high-level stuff because it all happened within a few days. We have a high-level proposal from them. And we also had an over-the-phone meeting with another firm that has an amazing track record. PPS is their calling card, Project for Public Spaces. They're out of New York, but they have a tremendous track record in turning around Halifax. They've done the plan for Ottawa. They've done work in Kingston. And I mean, that's what they do. They are truly expert in their field. So we felt very confident getting proposals from them. We also tried to reach out to the Marketing Collaborative, who is the group that did the 2005-2006 study that recommended a community board. They're more of a group of folks who get together on projects specifically, and they were not able to provide a proposal to us in this time frame. What we asked them to do, and knowing that this is, I'll say, early stage, we needed to ask them some fairly specific things so that we could at least have an idea that they were saying the same thing, generally speaking, and could give us a range of both how they would approach it and what it would cost to get it done, and could they work within our ambitious timeframes. Both said yes, and this is, I won't read all the words on it, but essentially, we provided a scope of work that they could comment on. Both firms, as I say, have the experience, the depth of resources to get this done. And the responses were obviously not like an RFP where it's, line by line by line. So depending on what we would want them to do, their quotes are ballpark, sort of $55,000 to $75,000. So the specific recommendation that we would make back with regards to governance is that we be directed as staff to refine the scope of work, revise the quotations, and secure a budget somewhere in the neighborhood of $55,000 to $75,000 in order to select a consulting firm that could commence work in February of 2014 to develop a proposal for a governance structure. One of the things in that process, of course, that we would do is, as we met with them in much more detail, is to understand whether we could do some of the work in-house. I mean, we do have a lot of experience in a number of these areas versus what we're not expert at. And I think what we want to net this down to is working with experts in the areas that we don't have the expertise. So we do not want to take an approach of, handing over the keys and saying, bring the car back when you've got it all figured out. We will work closely with them. And we need to get into a pretty quick granular level with them to understand how we would fulfill that recommendation. Okay? Any questions on this portion?
Well, I'll ask, have a refresher, I'll actually pass the chair off to you, Rob. Councillor Basuda, please. Through you, Councillor Basuda, to Donna Lee, what were we at when you came in? What was our subsidy? Maybe you know too, John. I mean, we've reduced the subsidy,
Yes, substantially.
taxpayer subsidy for the market, roughly by how much in the last year and a half, 2 years?
Through the chair, so I don't have it in front of me, but I would say that to where we are in 2014 to where we were 2 years ago, there's a savings of about $75,000 that we've been able to take it down. So it's at around 160 this year for 2014, and 235 was I think 2011.
So it happened 75K is the higher end of your quotes in your consultant search as well, right?
Yes, and I think actually when I recall looking back for my research program purposes, the year before that was 300 and something. So I think the staff has done a really good job of streamlining that down. And we continue, in fact, to have conversations about scheduling and all that sort of stuff. There's a limit, obviously, to where you can go, but I think the 2014 budget is 167,000, I believe, which is probably in the existing structure about where it can go.
So through you, Robert, to you, John, I'm aware of the pedigree of both shortlisted firms here. And, early on, you never know, but early on, I'm pretty confident in both. And your ability to choose and others on who would be the consultant, for lack of a better word. There is no alternative here. What would be the alternative recommendation should, let's say, council, eventually this gets to council and they decline a commitment of 55 or 75K?
I guess, the alternative with any of these things is that we do it in-house. What I would say it jeopardizes is, number one, timeframes, and number two, not an impossible task, but a more difficult task of getting it right.
Good. I'll take the chair back.
Councillor Collins?
Yeah, and I'm looking at certain components of what's in front of us. The mission, vision, values, the create a governance structure, the board structure, how we would choose those people who'd participate on the board. And it seems like fairly simple stuff that we almost deal with every day here in this building. And I'm looking at the develop a sustainable financial model to minimize the city levy, which is certainly one of the top priorities that we would have. And I'm not certain what a consultant could do coming in, because we know that their time here would be a finite period for them to come in. They'd conduct interviews as they usually do with all stakeholders, similar to what you did for your report that we received at our last meeting. And essentially, they'd leave us with something, I guess, with a document that puts us on a road to getting into a different place. But usually those long-range plans, it takes a long time, I'm assuming, for the first board, whatever that it's comprised of. It would take them easily a calendar year to get to a point where we'd say, we have a vision now of what maybe the farmers market should be 5 to 10 years from now. So I'm not certain what consultant does in that regard, because
through the chair, we had those very direct conversations with them, because I think, to your exact point, Councillor Collins, when you have the first 3 minutes of your conversation, any consultant will back away to the highest level and tell you all the things that they can do for you, that we do all the research. And we said, stop, please. We have spent a lot of time, and there have been many reports done. So I'm not looking for you as a consulting firm to create the vision, etc. We might need to have some refinement, and that's why I put in the scope work, to refine those things. in such a way that they fit with the vision of a community board governance structure as opposed to what we want the market to be. So there are subtleties within that where they'll have to use, and this is where their expertise comes in. It's not that we need them to go and redo everything that we've done, and we've provided them, before they'd even give their proposal, we provided them with all of the documentation that we have researched recently and presented to yourselves. So, you know, it's really what's the value of expertise, I suppose, and of course in that business, which is a business I was in before, it's a combination of time and expertise. If I ask one person a question, they'll say, well, I can answer that and it costs $100 an hour. And if I ask, a lawyer or whatever, they'll say, well, I can answer questions for you, but that'll cost you $250 an hour, that kind of thing. So it's around the value of the expertise. I guess where we lean in terms of trying to get at least some help from them is because of that expertise. We can put in the, the legwork, the time, do a lot of the logistics around it. But in the same way that I wouldn't try to, I'll say, outguess my lawyer on maybe it's a real estate deal or who knows what, I certainly wouldn't want to be just, chatting with him unnecessarily or her. I would want to do what I could and then use the expertise there that I don't have. So I'm not sure at this point in time where we could end up in terms of an agreement with them. At some point they would say, you know what, if you go too low, it's really not worth their time. But I'm certainly getting the indication from you that it would be worth, as we would go to a next step, to see if we could really delineate that expertise piece and see how we can supplement that with our own resources, and maybe the number is quite different.
Well, and I say that in the context, too, and I appreciate that answer, John. I say it in the context of having been to the last meeting where you basically summarized, I think, in a nutshell with your report, the challenges that the market faces. You addressed many of the historical hiccups and hurdles that they've faced, and I think you also presented a number of opportunities that we all know exist, many of them raised by the stallholders, some of them raised through consultation with their customers. And so I thought it was a matter then of prioritizing some of the matters that you had raised and somehow grappling with the new governance model, which, I mean, there's 100 different models out there, right? I mean, we can talk about how many counselors are on it, we've had a blueprint suggested by the association, but there are other avenues and other ways that we could take ourselves. And so I thought it was basically finding consensus with those people who are already in discussion with each other, eventually sitting down at the table and then saying, okay, now where do we go from here based on everything that John had presented and summarized? And that would include the new revenue sources, some of the issues you've talked about today in terms of the parking. And then we're sort of off to the races with some of those issues and constantly trying to come up with, what's the long-term plan and what kind of successes do we see in 214 that might make us put more eggs in another basket.
Right.
All the while utilizing, I think your expectation was some kind of marketing assistance that's going to get us there. So I didn't anticipate seeing anything that suggested that we would hire somebody to. I mean, the last thing I'd like to see is to hire somebody and basically they, in a different form, show us everything that you showed us in December. Right. And
well. Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, in response, you'll see in a few minutes where we have delineated, excuse me, I'll call it the action register for whether it's parking sign, like we can do that stuff. And to your point, I mean, I guess what we were exploring with, and I'd be the first to, and I think others would agree that, when we received these proposals that I'm talking about in the last 2 days, it hasn't been well vetted yet in terms of what could or couldn't be. So, I would be extremely open to taking back from this the notion that it's almost asking the question, what would prevent us from doing it ourselves? And we'll vet that, and if we can't come up with a good answer, then we'll just carry on and do it. If we come up with a good answer in some specific ways, we'll come back and say, okay, this piece, because it's really about the governance, it's not the other stuff. This piece around the governance, and we'll get advice from legal, other staff members who have been involved in setting up or taking down various boards. We'll try to determine if there still is in fact a piece that needs some outside help. Otherwise, we'll tell you that we'll map it out and get it done.
Thanks for that answer. And maybe this is one of those issues that we, I'm quite willing to sit down with some of the current stakeholders to talk about what the new board looks like and how the selection process works for their members, for our members through council, and then if there's a public component to that. Traditionally, it's through our own selection committee that occurs, through a public call through the newspaper. Right. So some of these things, it's almost like we don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Well,
and maybe there's a way for us to get to a new board and then come back to say to this new entity, whatever it looks like, is there a need to spend, these kinds of resources on X, and whatever X
right.
is, I'm certain contained in the proposals that you receive from both of those businesses.
Well, certainly as I think back to some of the models we were actually chatting about earlier, if I think of, as an example, just the London model, which is, standalone corporation, I guess, owned by the city. 2 members from council sit on it, plus then other qualified members of the community that are approved by council for a term, etc. I mean, the models themselves are there. So I think it's a very frugal suggestion that we start there and then identify what we don't know and see if we can get some help pulling those pieces together. So I think for us as well, the thing that we need to sort through is how can we get this done quickly, because that's critical, I think, to everybody involved.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Chairman Farr. So, John, I'm not going to name any names here, but you've got up there 2 expert firms. So these firms are the ones that have worked and developed and guided new farmers markets in Ontario over the last probably.
Through you, Mr. Chair, for example, some of the work cited by PPS, Halifax Seaport Farmers Market, Eastern Market in Detroit, Byward Market in Ottawa, Boston Public Market District, Charleston City Market, and Kingston Farmers Market in Kingston, Ontario. And the folks at Evergreen are, at least in this area, are most noted for their work at the Brickworks and the Don Valley area. But in addition to that, they note that they've been active in the Hamilton region since 2005. I know, for example, that there are, broad discussions going on. They've partnered with local groups, including Bay Area Restoration Council and Environment Hamilton, on community greening projects, and provided over $25,000 in funding. We also delivered a professional training workshop series to city staff and elected officials in 2005 on community engagement and public space revitalization. They both are deep in credentials, I think, for what we're hoping to achieve. But I would agree with Councillor Collins that we should look more in depth at what we could use them for in areas that we just don't have the expertise.
Sure. So, and Farmers Markets of Ontario, I know you had consulted with them. I gave you your name a while ago.
Yes.
Barney?
Yes. He actually joined us at one of our focus group sessions where we presented back to focus group participants the report that I ultimately brought to the subcommittee. I would say his area of expertise in this regard is not as strong, because their area of emphasis is more on seasonal markets and the policies and metrics and performance metrics around the seasonal markets. I don't think they or his company has this level of involvement. I would suspect he knows much like the group that did the work in 2005. They probably know a bunch of folks who do, and if given the time, they could probably put something together, but that's not all they do.
Okay, thank you, John.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You take the chair. I know both companies, John, and between the two, I think PPS is more direct and has more pedigree, although Evergreen is a great example of a group of folks who are truly innovative, and I know that they've had some work here in Hamilton, and I'm hoping more in the future. Really respect that company, and Brickworks is a wonderful example of adaptive reuse and, you know, a go-to place in TO, and certainly a lot of Hamiltonians have visited there as well. But PPS I'd focus on for now. Given your recommendation, and given the time crunch that has been before us for some time, given the purported loss of business by, if not all stallholders, almost all stallholders at our farmers market, and your already thorough reporting back to this subcommittee and ultimately council these last few months and the work of our other staff as well. You know, I'm kind of going the other way in that, I mean, we just heard through Councillor Pursuit's questions, just the long list of very successful, most of them farmers markets that PPS has attached themselves to. So through Councillor Pursuit, was it just governance or a whole lot of other work in addition to offering a governance model that PPS did for places like Byward and Kingston and others in Boston?
Yeah, through you, Councillor Pursuit. Yes, their repertoire, first of all, I would say is more targeted on these kind of, I'll call it a revitalization exercise than would be Evergreen. Evergreen is, I mean, their name suits what they focus on, and it's a lot about, you know, city building in an environmentally friendly way, focus on food, etc. PPS is extremely focused on these kind of revitalizations. In Halifax, it's also my understanding, not only did they kind of go in and do the report, set up all the criteria and literally help them set up the new governance structure, they helped with the selection process of board members, and they even ran the market. They took over the operation of the market for a period of time until everybody, you know, got their feet firmly planted on the ground. So their repertoire, I would say, is more extensive in pure turnaround, if I can use that terminology.
Being suggested here, I mean, you're saying you would revise the quotes, but it's not going to be more than 75K through you, Basuda?
No, I mean, that would be, if that's their starting estimate, then our thought was we would now work, you know, with them to understand what we really want to have done and how much does that cost. And I think the further impetus that I have now is basically to challenge them and say, what can you do that you know we can't do? You know, help us clarify your expertise, basically.
So what, that clarification, does that cost us anything through you, or is that still part of the bid?
Oh, no, it's just part of the preliminary process that, you know, they all know that we were rushing to get something together. I asked them, like, give me maximum 2-pager for today. Because I need to understand, A, if it sounds like you can help us, and B, roughly how much would it cost. And they know then, sorry, Councillor Farr, that we'll go back to them after today and feedback and say, okay, here's now what we need to do together to just sort out whether or not there is an engagement here or not.
Through the chair, yes, if I may just add a couple of things. So the situation in Halifax was that they built a new market, and it was funded by the federal government. And the original board of directors that was operating the market was a vendor-led board of directors. And it didn't go very well, and PPS was brought in to assist with that transition. And as John said, they're a very they understand the complexities of markets, and they came in and they built a new governance structure that is associated with the Port Authority in Halifax and also has vendor representation on it. And so that's one model. Their experience in Ottawa was that The Byward Market, which is the central market in downtown Ottawa, was the primary building of it was privatized, and slowly over time, the food capacity of the Byward Market waned, and it became more of a tourist destination as opposed to a food destination. And PBS was brought in to help revitalize the Byward Market, to rebuild the food capacity of the market. So that's their example there. I just wanted to add a little bit of detail to those. And I also wanted to say that because this is something that was brought in front of the council in 2005 with that report from London about a board of directors at the market, and I guess from my perspective of being an acting manager there for the last year and a half, that if council and the vendor community want to build a board of directors, it's my recommendation that you really do need to have somebody come in to assist us with some of this work. And as John's saying, we could drill it down to find out what that specialized work is. But it's really, I can't say enough. I think that, or speak strongly enough that it's really critically important that you have a third party come in to actually build the complex terms of reference that's required for such an operation. And PBS is, as noted, they have a lot of experience.
Thank you, Donnelly. Back to Councillor Farr.
Yeah, and so thank you. I appreciate that very much, Donnelly, and having a bit of a stroll through both markets you referenced. And fairly recently, I guess, they seem to be doing very well. So just down to the Councillor Collins's point, and I completely understand and appreciate it. And he's been here many, many times in situations like this where we're, I guess, establishing a new form of governance for whatever. And you don't need, I clearly, just like anyone else around this table, don't want to try to, reinvent the wheel or have, 3 or 4 different angles coming at a restructuring when really all you really need to do is roll up your sleeves and get at the restructuring. But it's this drilling down that I can't let slide at this point. We know that they're good at this. We know that they're specialized, and we just don't know how that, what if we haven't drilled down to the point where we could see how it's going to benefit us in our unique situation here in Hamilton specifically. And I'm not comfortable let loose of this recommendation until such time as I better understand what it is exactly they can do for us. And you're asking for a secure budget for exactly how much. So I really don't want to kill this recommendation here yet today. So with that, I'll take the chair back. And is there any other questions? Second time? Anybody? Okay. So you're going to carry on and get into the work plan highlights, and maybe some of this will assist us, John, as you continue. And then maybe at the end we'll have some more questions, and we'll get back to all 3 recommendations.
And if I may add on, I don't think the discussion necessarily changes the recommendation in words. It just is kind of further emphasis on work we need to do within the recommendation. And, maybe we come back in terms of the budget piece with something that's totally different than this. But essentially, that's the only major variable, I think, that we could end up with, depending on how we refine this. Okay? Thank you. So I didn't want to belabor this, but I did want to, again, getting back to my introductory remarks, based on the really great collaborative work with the Stallholders Association representatives, staff members across the organization. We've been able to get at a lot of these things quickly. So revised vendor floor plan and backfill of open spaces. You'll recall in our last meeting that there was discussion around the fact that there are some empty spaces. What we wanted to make sure that we did, and do it quickly, is that we don't just rush and say, okay, let's bring in some new vendors to backfill these situations, when in fact many of our existing vendors have a strong desire to move elsewhere in the market for all the right reasons for better visibility. In some cases, it can be because of temperature and humidity for the various products and services. So it's not quite as easy as saying, we have 3 or 4 empty spots, let's just bring in some new folks. So what we began literally this morning with a call from Taiwan, where one of our stallholder representatives is vacationing, Shane. We began the interview process with Shane. We have 2 people at the market all day today interviewing face-to-face, one-on-one, each stallholder. And they'll do that over the next number of days. And they're talking about essentially 3 issues. One is their space in terms of its size. Secondly, their space in terms of location. And a third element we threw in was around hours of operation for the market. So going through that exercise, we have some outside help for a very small amount of money helping us with that. We're creating, call them wireframes. If you're looking on a computer screen at a floor plan in the other markets where it shows where all the stall holders are, we're creating wireframes that we go through, or to go through, that we can add, change, move around, etc., computer-based, and come up with some proposals then to vet with the Stallholders Association. And we know that this will make, we hope, a lot of people happier, and probably some people won't be as happy, but we'll have to see where all that lands and what would be, quote, the ideal layout, and then create what would be the necessary action plan to make that happen. And it would clearly be a staged kind of thing, but it's all on the premise of working towards what is the ideal mix from a traffic flow point of view and all of the other unique considerations that have to be taken into account. We've also, I should say, asked the stallholders in this process about facilities that they require. As a separate topic to some degree, we've talked about infrastructure requirements, potentially for additional ventilation for cooking, et cetera. So we're getting everybody's voice heard at this point in time. Hours of operation, as I mentioned, many of the stallholder community have, expressed the very clear fact that, our competition, if you will, is open kind of 9 to 9. And unless we're there when people want to shop, you can't rely, particularly during the weekday hours that are during also business hours for office workers, et cetera. And I've had personally many people, both in focus groups and just off the street some days when I'm walking to and from there, say, I went to buy some X the other day and it was 4:30 or 4:45 and it was closed. And it's, so we in this little survey piece that we're talking to them, we're trying to understand what is a window of hours that they would commit to because it suits their customers and it suits them. And we'll see again where that one falls. Cell coverage, if you've tried to make a call or receive a call in there, is very inconsistent, generally of very poor quality, and therefore only selected vendors can even offer debit or credit card service. So we've got Bell and City IT assessing that, and we'll have a recommendation back from them by the 24th. Very similarly, we've asked them to see what would be involved in leveraging off of the Wi-Fi installation that already exists in the library. Say, could we enable more Wi-Fi, and if we could, what would be the cost in the marketplace so that, again, they're not using the cell network for debit and for Visa. They're using Wi-Fi, and also then for patrons. So if I'm in there shopping and we want it to be a destination, and they grab a sandwich and a coffee and they sit down at the open space, and as we see in Tim Hortons and Starbucks and everywhere else now, they could flip open their laptop or whatever and maybe do a few emails. And you can restrict through software the amount of capacity that's offered. We're not going to be doing movies and things down there, so we'll make sure that. But we really want to get our hands around that as, again, part of the customer service and shopping experience. So again, we've targeted to have feedback and I'll say recommendations ready by the 24th, which is next Friday. So that's coming quickly. Ventilation, similarly, Donna Lee has been working both with her own facilities team and leveraging her contacts in the industry, St. Lawrence Market as an example, to how do you do it? And she's connected our facilities people with theirs to understand some of the implications that we need to look at here. This piece is going to be married to the master floor plan decisions as well. I'll make these numbers up, don't quote me on these, but let's say today that we had 3 people who were doing some, or 4 people doing some sort of food preparation today, but they really want to do a bunch more and would require ventilation to do actual cooking with grease, etc. But in the overall floor plan, we say, you know what, I think an ideal critical mass of fresh food preparation vendors, excuse me, would be 6, not 4, or 7, not 4, whatever it is. We want to decide that so then we can say, as I saw in London, for example, where they made that decision early, obviously, and all of the food vendors are down 1 row. So from an infrastructure point of view, it's the most efficient. So we're considering that. As I mentioned earlier, the temperature and humidity issue is significant for both the success of some products staying fresh, so they have a longer lifespan, and even some equipment with the humidity being damaged, etc. So both of those pieces we hope to have some cost estimates and understanding in place by February the 14th. Could be a Valentine's Day present to us, we don't know. New Canadians is an interesting one in that many of the new members of our community live downtown and shop at the market. And so I think the vendors have done an excellent job of matching their product offerings to the unique requirements. But one of the gaps is that many of our customers absolutely do not have English as a first language, and their communication skills are very challenged. So we don't know what the right answer is, but it was a suggestion that came up in one of our weekly meetings with the Stallholders Association reps, that we really need to better understand how we can align our offerings, whether it's through signage or I don't know what it is. So we have a commitment to work with the Y, who of course does a lot of intake and training and settling in downtown here, to try to get some better understanding of that. Along the lines of our parking and the space that's been afforded by Marty and Ted on the 1B level, we also wanted to explore taking that to the next step. And for example, if I knew in advance that I could buy 100 pounds of something, and or even several bags of things, and there was a service there, it could be high school kids, volunteers, don't know what it is, but they could help me get all that stuff somehow over to my car at the parkade, that'd be great. There may even be opportunities that we don't fully leverage right now, even for pickup. So, if I talk to the folks at the market, there are some some customers who buy in bulk and do arrange for pickup, but it's not necessarily part of our day-to-day operation. So we wanted to explore that as well. And all of these miscellaneous elements are coming together for what I would call the relaunch. And if we can nail these down, they don't have to be 100% done. We can kind of feed them out incrementally, but it gives us a whole new level of energy to present to the public, come on back and try us again kind of thing. Marketing communications, it's a big area. We are, I think, I could have to ask Charlie, we're communicating well. We talk all the time. We meet once a week, even when the guys are on vacation. We've had them dial into a bridge, and we've still had our meetings. We started, I know there were newsletters in the past, but I thought it was an opportunity to introduce myself to the team. So we used that forum to put out the first newsletter, which I believe Nancy may have shared with you a copy this past week. And every Monday we'll be using that vehicle. That's it. You can also get it in color. It looks even better. And we really want to keep all of the vendor community engaged in the progress that we're making here. So newsletter on Monday, they're being interviewed one-on-one over the next few days, update next Monday, and that sort of thing. So we're trying hard internally to make sure that happens. We think we need not a full year plan, and also we need to be really zeroed in on roughly a 6-month marketing plan right now. And what are the incremental steps that we can take every week to grow the visibility of the market? A lot of it is we're hoping that our media friends will be partners with us in this. If we can create some exciting visual changes there, some events, some things going on, hopefully we'll get some positive media coverage, get more people, trying the market out, take it for a test drive again and see if that experience isn't a good one. Internally, we're working as much as we can with the stallholder community to put a smile on their face. They are the best ambassadors, right? And we know from the feedback in the focus groups that's not been a winning recipe on some days, where people who are not necessarily regular shoppers go in and say, geez, I went in and I tried it, but that person was pretty cranky that day, and that's not really the experience I was looking for. So we have a lot of things that each individual stallholder can do to help the process as well. As I mentioned earlier, I think we have a lot of opportunity for collaboration around marketing, social media, et cetera, and we'll try to put together a very cost-effective program that relaunches us as quickly as possible here. And I think that was it. I would be delighted to entertain any additional questions.
Thank you, Chairman Farr, and through you to John. What I like about here with your work plan highlights and the status, the fact that you're meeting with individual stallholders and chatting with them, so you're getting direct input, which I don't recall ever having these chats with stallholders that I can recall with my dealings talking to stallholders there. So you're reaching out to them and communicating. And they're responding very well to you, Mr. Chair, back. They're responding well to the individual.
I'll tell you in a couple of days. We really just started today with the one-on-one interviews, and I'm hoping that they'll find a more comfortable forum. A lot of the individuals, of course, they were all invited to our focus groups. I would guess we had 6 or 7 unique vendors, maybe with more than one representative, but unique vendors actually come. So it's 10%, and it's they speak on behalf of the whole market, but you're really not talking directly to 90%. And this is a forum that we hope they're more comfortable with, even from a language point of view, that they can express their thoughts. So thank you for that.
Chair, through you to John, there's a lot of work that's gone into this. It's well put together. Like the status report is great. I can't shoot any holes in it.
Don't try too hard.
Just the consultant in here with the secure budget of 55 to 75,000. I know we talked about that here. I just hope it doesn't get out that we're wasting some money here. I understand it, and I understand the business concept and what you're looking for. I do, right, personally. So, I think we'll have discussions on that. But overall, excellent work here, and I think we're heading in the right. I know we're heading in the right direction with this. And thank you and your staff for working on this as you have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go back. Thank you, committee. Thank you, John. Move to receive the report. Moved by Collins, seconded by Pasuta. All in favor? Carried. I think there's only 2 recommendations because the one has to go to council. Right? Right. So signage is the first one that we can take care of here. Recommendation that staff obtain specs and quotes on the exterior signage options as soon as possible without negatively impacting the public art program mandate and process, and report back to the Hamilton Farmers Market Subcommittee. Moved by Councillor Pasuta, seconded by Councillor Collins. All in favor? Okay, so that carries.
And that there will be some consultation with the stallholders. Is the expectation then after we approve this that you're coming back with a preferred sign for our, approval at the next meeting? Is that what we can anticipate?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, the short answer is yes, and some of the, I'll say the tricky part of it is that there are some potential elements to the signing designs that we saw that whether we went ahead with those or not would depend on what the decision ultimately is around the public art. Because there is some interesting, which is a good thing, some interesting overlap, at least conceptually. So at some point in time, we hope through our own consultations to get clearer on what makes sense and sort of pull the trigger on the design. In the meantime, we'll try to get specs and costs on all the options, the design options, so that when we arrive at that point together, we can pull the trigger quickly.
But and again, I want to emphasize, in the spirit of cooperation, I'm hoping the stallholders will be a part of that process. So I'd hate to end up in a situation where there's choice and we choose one that's the least popular, only to find out that the people we're trying to help are not on our side. So I don't want to end up in that situation. So if there's anything you can do to, again, cast your net to those people who are working out of that facility and get their input, I'd feel more comfortable making a decision knowing that they were part of that process.
Through you, Chair, you have our commitment towards that process. We need to figure out the logistics, because what I found very valuable, and I've been in the business before, so it's always letting the presenter, in this case the firm from Toronto, give you their context for what they're about to present and how it fits in. And it was interesting, just in our own discussion, I was curious about one design over another, more in its physical location, because I said my gut interpretation is X, but do you know what the research says in terms of X versus Y? And she said, well, the research actually points to Y is better. So it's great. That's why we need experts doing this sort of thing. So we will definitely work through that process, and we want to do it in I'll say a visual and almost paper-based way, so that we're not getting a bunch of things kind of flying around.
Next one is the recommendation that the following motion be presented at the next council meeting, and that's on the parking issue. And if I can get Robert to take the chair and just to legal, just to get it on the record. Once again, this is because this is where the parking question originally emanated, right? So, emanated.
That's correct.
We heard from John. Ted's here, so is Marty. There's 5 bullets in this motion that will inevitably go toward council as a whole to Marty, through you, Chair. Does this all look in order and seems fine to you?
Through Mr. Chairman, yes, it is all fine with us from a parking point of view. I just have one very minor comment on the second bullet about changing the signs from level 1A to a level 1B. We do not require council approval for that because we have delegated authority. So we certainly agree with it, but it causes problems for us when we have to go to council for moving some signs and so others. So if we could reword that we'll just do it and we don't require council approval, we would prefer that, although it's not drop dead serious.
Okay, so we'll do that then with Eleonora, maybe between now and council. Okay. And moved by, I'll take the chair back. Moved by Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Pasuta. All in favor. That is carried. Now on to the governance. The recommendation is that staff be directed to refine the scope of work, revise the quotations, and secure a budget, $55K to $75K, in order to select a consulting firm that could commence work in February 2014, right around the corner, to develop a proposal for a governance structure. Moved by Collins.
I just want to confirm, you're coming back with information. We're not giving you the marching orders now to go out and do it. You're actually coming back with, again, a narrow scope of what they propose to offer and a detailed budget, and we'll have an opportunity, if we don't agree with that, to voice our concerns at the next meeting.
Through you, Chair, yes, we'll do that, and I wonder if it would make the recommendation taste better if we took out dollars and we change the wording to be something to the order of and to secure or to determine and secure any necessary budget.
It's fine by me. As long as I have an opportunity, if I'm not comfortable with it, to voice my concerns later, then if it's gathering information, I have no problem with that.
You're very good at seeking out those opportunities. Moved by Collins, seconded by Pasuda. All in favor? It carries. Thank you, John. I think those are all of the recommendations. There's no other questions on this presentation. Good enough. Thank you again. And thank you to all who gathered here today. I believe we just want, is there any general information? Does anybody have general information? None? Any staff have general information? Any private or confidential matters? I'm having trouble speaking today. Any private or confidential matters? None? Motion to adjourn. Moved by Collins, seconded by Councilor Pasuda. All in favor? It carries. Thank you, and thank you, Ida.